On Tuesday, we talked about taking the data and finding the frequency of something and the relative frequency. We then ended class with just starting to do the bar graph, so I will end this video with bar graph and bar chart. So here we have data of MLB players in the different colleges that have been attended by a Major League Baseball player. What we were looking at was the number of schools that were attended within each of the states. So we talked about, in order to find how many schools are in Texas or New York or Michigan, you could go through this column D, and you could count all the ones that say Texas, all the ones that say New York, so on and so forth. But this data set is quite large. There's 1,207 lines of data, so that's a lot of counting. So in order to make it a little more efficient, we said we could name all 50 states that are represented here, so we could list out all 50 of them if we can remember all 50. Or what we did was we had Excel name all 50 states for us by simply taking this column of data and copying it. So we highlight the column D, and then we copy it, and we can paste it into any column we want. So simply, I've just created a duplicate of that column. Now within this column of data, the states are duplicated because there's multiple schools that are in Texas, Alabama, Arizona, so on and so forth. So we told the computer, the Excel program, to delete the duplicates. So we highlight that column and we go to data, and then right here we have remove duplicates. We're selecting everything in that column. Anything that's a duplicate, it will be deleted, only one will remain. Click OK. It says it found 1,158 duplicates, and now we have 50 unique values that remain. Press OK. So now my list is only those states. Now what we want to do is create the frequency table. So we're going to create a frequency column. So we want to know how many of these schools are in Texas. So again, I could go through and I could count them up and type the total right here, but then I'm gonna have to do that for all the states, and that will take some bit of time. Again, you can do that, it'll just take longer. So what we're actually gonna do to make it efficient is we're gonna type in a equation for Excel to actually count for us. So to type an equation, you simply type equals, and then you can begin. And what we're going to do is count. So as I start typing the word count, count if is an option. What this is doing is going to count something if it says something. So we want to count this range of values. So in column D, not this column. Let me go through and delete that. We want to count over here in column D. So notice that as I'm highlighting, this says D2 colon D11. So this is saying to count the entire range. If there was a comma between these two, it only count those two cells. So this is giving us a range. So I could go and I could drag this all the way down to the bottom. Or since I know there's 1,207 data points and the first row is my title, then I know this is going to go to 1,208. So now it's actually highlighted the entire column for me. So I'm telling it that the range of values to count, and now I need to tell it what to count. I want it to count those that have TX. So I can do quotations, TX, end quotations, and you always close your parentheses. Now when we press enter, it tells us how many in that column are 80. So I can copy this formula, as you see in our formula right here. I can just simply copy and paste this in the next cell, but again, I don't want it to be Texas, I don't want it to be New York. So I can simply take this formula and replace TX with NY. So I could do that, and I can go down the entire list and do it. But there's still another more efficient way to do it. Right now, I've typed the actual phrase I want it to look for. What I could do is just reference the cell. And so it's going to count the range of values within this interval that say whatever this cell says. So I'll press enter, I still get 80 because that's highlighted, it's telling me what it's looking for. Now to copy that formula down, the quickest way is I just click on that bottom right little square and I drag down and it's copying the formula. When I double click into the cell, I can see what it's saying. It's counting this range and it's looking for New York. Well, notice that the range of values changed. Everything shifted down. I don't want it to shift down just because I went down a cell. So that means I need to go back to my original and I need to edit this formula. What we can do is called anchoring. I'm going to anchor my interval so that no matter where I am on my spreadsheet, this formula is always going to use this interval. So you anchor by putting dollar signs in front of the value of the cell, the row number of the cell. So here I've put it before the 2 and before the 1208. Now I press enter. The 80 did not change, so that's good. But notice that as I drag this down, when I let go, the values may change. They may not change depending if I've done everything correctly. So this kept the range the same and it's still looking for New York. So as I go down, go all the way to the bottom of my list, it has now done the counting for me. That was actually a lot faster than going through and counting Texas, counting New York, counting Alabama, so on and so forth. And what I can do here at the bottom is I can get a sum equals the sum of, and I want it to add everything here above. Because what should the sum of the frequency be? It should be the total number of data points I have in my data set. Close parentheses, enter. 1,207. So I know everything should be correct here. So that's your frequency table, or the column. Now let's do the relative frequency. Remember, relative frequency is going to be a proportion or a percent. And it's the proportion of percent of the whole. So 80 of all the schools were Texas schools. So in order to find the proportion, I could say 80 divided by the total, 1,207, and it'll give me the proportion. But then I'm going to have to go and type that into each cell in respect to the total for that state. So there's another way we can do this. We can say this is equal to this cell divided by 1207. But now I will have to type the value 1207 into every cell. So again, what we want to do is reference the cell we're actually looking for. So 1207 is right here. I can just click on it and it'll auto-populate the address of that cell. So here's the proportion. Now if I drag that down, oh, I get an error message. What is wrong? When I double click, it's saying it's doing H3 divided by H52. Well, what is in H52? Nothing, because again, since I shifted down a cell in my table, it's shifted down a cell from what I'm looking at. So I need to go back to my formula and I need to anchor what I'm dividing by. My numerator is going down each time, down in the table. It's referencing the one below. But I need it to anchor what I'm dividing by, the 1207. So I'll press enter. And now when I drag that formula down to copy, I can check. This is doing H3 divided by that same cell of 1207. So now I can drag that down and I have all the proportions for each of those states. If I was to drag it down one more, I'll get a value of 1. That 1 is the 1207 divided by 1207, so I should get a 1. All right, so now we have these numerical summaries where we have frequency and relative frequency, but sometimes it's easier to look at a graph. So what we want to do is create a bar graph of the frequencies. So I'm going to highlight the frequencies, making sure I do not highlight the total. And then I go up here to data, or I'm sorry, insert, and we have these graph choices. So we're going to click up here that what looks like a bar graph, click on the very first bar graph, and here we go. Here's a bar graph of that data. So we do need to give our graph a title. So we could simply call this bar graph. Actually, you don't even want to say bar graph because it obviously is a bar graph. We can say distribution of schools within each state. So remember, distribution is just a display of the data. So here is a bar graph. Typically, we would also add in, or we would add in down here, would be the name of the state. So this would be Texas, New York, whoops. And then on the y-axis would be the frequency. Okay, now let's look at a pie chart. So a pie chart is where we can put these proportions or percents. So you could take these and multiply them all by 100 to convert them to a percent, or we can leave it as is and go through and insert, and we can do the pie chart. Here's your chart title, so we could say proportion of schools within each state, or percent, depending on which one you have. And so you have that, and if you hover over a slice of this pie, it'll tell you what it is. It says series 1.5, and it gives us the value of approximately 3%. So what I want to task you with is figuring out how to change this legend, what's telling us what each color is, or on the bar graph, how it has each of these values. How can you change these to actually be the state names, right? Because that's what these are. This is Texas. Texas has 80 schools. New York had 55 schools. And so here, the one, this blue, legend entry 1, I think that's what this is. Yes, I'd rather this say Texas, New York, so on and so forth. So that's a challenge that I'm bringing to you to do.